So you may want to give it a minute or two. It's up to you, really.
All right, ma'am. We'll start in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Very good, bye.
Lawyer or the new lawyer.
Yeah. Okay, now, did you? You know. Shivam. Dr. Menaka Guruswamy. No, that's it.
Yes.
Hey, bye.
Bhavya, please unmute yourself and we can start now. Because participants will keep coming in. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bhavya Shahi, Organizing Committee member of Vaze Model United Nations. I will be the host for the day, and it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome here our speaker of the day, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy ma'am. I welcome Principal of VG Vaze College, Dr. B.B. Sharma sir, Chairman of Public Concern for Governance Trust, Mr. Julio Ribeiro sir, and all the dignitaries and participants present here today. I, on behalf of Public Concern for Governance Trust in association with Vaze Model United Nations and SVKM's Praveen Gandhi College of Law, would like to welcome you all to this webinar. One of the organizers of this webinar is Public Concern for Governance Trust, PCGT, which is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro sir, Dr. R.K. Anand sir, and late Mr. B.G. Deshmukh sir, to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system. In order to sensitize and mentor the youth in ethical values with an emphasis on good governance, PCGT started the Youth for Governance YFG program in the year 2012. Previously, PCGT has organized dialogues, workshops, and webinars as requested by the campus ambassadors on the issues that are related to good governance and involving eminent speakers and role models in different fields to guide and inspire the youth. The late Sri Anna Saheb Vaze and his sons established the Kelkar Education Trust in 1979. This charitable trust aims to reach out to all, irrespective of the standing in society, without any discrimination. VG Vaze College is a multi-faculty institution established in 1984 by the Trust. Vaze College is the first NAAC accredited college in the state of Maharashtra with top 5-star ranking and was re-accredited in the second cycle with A grade in 2005 as well as in the third cycle in 2012. Our junior college is awarded with A grade by Maharashtra State Board of Secondary and Higher Secondary Education. It is one of the finest teaching learning education institutions in the country and has emerged as a role model of quality academic institution. We are proud to be in association with Vaze Model United Nations, which was established in the year 2017 by the then 12th grade students who wished to bring about change in our college. They wanted to give something back to the college that was shaping them to become the leaders of tomorrow. Hence, developing a cycle which accelerated their curiosity to learn and explore more about politics and international relations. Vaze Model United Nations has expanded tremendously ever since, and now we are back with our fourth edition. Again, We are proud to be in association with SPKM's Praveen Gandhi College of Law, which is a public charitable trust registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860 and the Bombay Public Trusts Act 1950. SVKM has always been committed to the cause of providing high quality education at various levels. SVKM's Praveen Gandhi College of Law, situated in Vireparle, Mumbai, offers the 5-year law course of BLS LLB under the auspices of Mumbai University. Now, I would like to introduce you to our speaker of the day, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy ma'am, who is a senior advocate at the Supreme Court of India. Through her litigation practice, she has successfully sought reforms of the bureaucracy in the country to fix tenure, defended federal legislation that mandates that all private schools admit disadvantaged children, and most recently overturned Section 377, the colonial era law that criminalizes consensual same-sex relations. Dr. Guruswamy is amicus curiae appointed by the Supreme Court in a case concerning over 1,500 alleged extrajudicial killings by security personnel. In her private law practice, she litigates in the areas of civil law, commercial law, and white-collar crime. She was on the Foreign Policy magazine's list 100 most influential global thinkers for 2019, and along with Arundhati Kajju on the Times magazine's 2019 list of 100 most influential people. In 2017, her portrait was unveiled at Rhodes House in Oxford University. She has also supported the constitution-making process in Nepal. Dr. Guruswamy ma'am was educated at Oxford University, Harvard Law School, and LLSIU. She was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford and Gammon Fellow at Harvard. She has been visiting faculty at Yale University Law School, New York University School of Law, and University of Toronto Faculty of Law. She was the B.R. Ambedkar Research Scholar and Lecturer in the law at Columbia Law School from 2017 to 2019, where she taught constitutional design in post-conflict democracies. Now, a few general instructions to all the participants. I request to all participants to type in your questions in the chat box directed towards the organizing committee as instructed in the Zoom chat box and on WhatsApp group. Also, participants watching us from YouTube Live can put their questions in YouTube chat box. We shall accommodate these questions towards the end of the session. It is recommended that all the participants to keep their videos on and microphones on mute at all times. If participants are facing any technical issues, they can feel free to contact the organizing team, hosts or the co-hosts. Kindly contact OC_tech over on Zoom chat to communicate the said technical concern. Now, I would like to request the chairman of PCGT, Mr. Julio Ribeiro, sir, to speak a few words. Over to you, sir.
For the introduction, which explained why so many young people were insisting that Menaka Guruswamy, the advocate, senior advocate from the Supreme Court, should be invited. And I think it was very, very apt that she changed the subject, because now with the Hatras killing, we are confronted with a very, very pertinent and live problem that we have been facing for centuries. And now it is coming out in the open because people have become much more alive and they know what is happening and what should happen. And I'm very happy that Dr. Guruswamy is going to talk to us about this subject instead of COVID. She might be also touching on COVID, but this is a subject which is now very live and something we would really like to know what we can do as a civil society to address this problem, to make it compulsory for the chief ministers, political parties to mend their ways, shall I say, in a manner of speaking, so that they do not allow this kind of 20th century or even 19th century kind of attitudes to flourish. Thank you so much, Dr. Guruswamy, for coming and addressing our students, because these are the future. At no point saying that it is a trite observation that they are the future of our country, and you will see that you will not have wasted your time, because these children are really very, very on the ball. They want to know what is happening. They want to form their own opinions, and that is what PCGT encourages them to do. We are very happy to have you, and I won't take any further time because it was only a short period that we have, and we want Dr. Guruswamy to tell us more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I would like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ribeiro. Obviously, your reputation precedes you. I want to thank the Public Concern for Governance Trust, the Vaze College, Mumbai, and the Praveen Gandhi College of Law for extending this invitation and for scheduling this lecture on a particularly apt day, I think, Gandhi Jayanti, October 2nd, today. I think, Mr. Ribeiro, if Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was alive today, I think all we would be able to say to him was, Bapu, we're so sorry. We've just failed. Hatras and the case in Hatras, and we'll talk about it, because I think as law students, it is important to be alive to the challenges that the law faces and the problems that the law reinforces in cases like Hatras, right? And as law students, you must, and I'm also a student of the law, we all have to ask ourselves one key question. Have we built a country where the most oppressed are doing better? Or have we built a country where the most oppressed are doing just as badly as they used to in the pre-constitutional era? Right? And I think that is the question that you must bear in mind as law students. I was very struck, Mr. Ribeiro, with some of the topics that were sent to me earlier, data privacy, Section 377, all of that. All of this doesn't matter, right? The Constitution does not matter if those who implement the Constitution, the state, the administration, chief ministers, and the police are determined to pick an old feudal caste-based code. None of it matters, right? And I think as law students, you must understand this, right? So in this lecture, we'll have three parts. One, I want to talk about, the original topic that I was going to discuss was COVID and courts, but when something like the Hatras gang rape happens, your conscience should be shaken enough, whereas law students and lawyers, you want to say what happened, what went wrong, where did the law fail, and where did the law compound the problem, right? So in the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to divide this lecture up into three parts. One, what is the Constitution's understanding? What is our constitutional commitment? Two, I want to talk about what is happening and what happened at Hatras. What does the Code of Criminal Procedure and what does the Indian Penal Code demand? Demand of the police, demand of a district magistrate, demand of society, the state, and the political class, and what has actually happened. So for those of you, if you haven't followed the news, on September 14th, so it's about, now, clearly in a different time, on September 14th, 2020, a young 19-year-old Dalit woman goes to work in her fields. So it's close to her home in the Hatras district of Western UP. Now, for those of you who do not know UP, Hatras is a district. It is a town. It is not a small remote village. So lest we comfort ourselves by saying, oh, it's really out there. This is 3 hours from Delhi. In UP, this is a modern bustling town. There is an infrastructure of police. There is an infrastructure of lower judiciary. And there is an infrastructure of civil society. This is modern India as we understand it. And yet what I will discuss, if this can happen in modern India, then this can happen to any of us. Right? That's the point. So since you know that this young woman was gang raped and eventually died from those resultant injuries, right? And naming naming a survivor of a sexual assault is not permitted under the law. So I've decided to give her a different name, right? So let's call this 19-year-old woman India, right? Let's call her that, right? And let's start with that. So when I refer to India, I refer to this 19-year-old Dalit woman. So she lived with her family in Hatras, and across the street from her lived an upper caste Thakur family. Now, for those of us in cities like Delhi and Bombay and all these flashy cities in India, we don't understand caste, right? We're taught that caste doesn't really exist. There are these constitutional provisions, but rare is the law school. And I'm not sure if VG Vaze is different or if Praveen Gandhi College of Law is different. Rare is the law school that actually addresses the reality of caste in India, right? So maybe in cosmopolitan cities, maybe we are exempt from this, but I doubt, right? So as a law student, the reality of your country is that caste is alive and kicking. And let us, through this one instance in Hatras, understand how and why. Because as a law student and as a lawyer, if you decide to grow up and become a criminal lawyer, then you must understand what is the context and the condition under which you will implement the Indian Penal Code, you will use the Constitution of India, and what is the context and conditions in which you will litigate your cases, right? So 19-year-old India lives across the street from her upper caste neighbors in Hatras. This is 200 kilometers or a 3-hour drive from Delhi. What happened subsequently? On September 14th, as News Laundry, which is, has done an extensive report on this, reports, India's mother finds her daughter's body in the part of the fields owned by the Thakur neighbors. She is quoted, and this is the mother, is quoted as saying this: "My daughter was lying naked with her tongue protruding from her mouth. Her eyes were bulging out and she was bleeding from her mouth, her neck, there was blood near her eyes. I also noticed bleeding from her vagina. I quickly covered her of my sari and started screaming." So this is Hathras, September 14th, 2020. This is what a mother says about what has happened to her daughter, who is still alive at this point. Now, when something like this happens and when there is a broad indication of rape, what does the law expect to be done? What does the law say that police officers must do under the Indian Penal Code and the Code of Criminal Procedure? So the first thing that the police is supposed to do is to register an FIR, wherever that might need to be done, whether at the police station or if the survivor is not in a way to go to the police station, at the hospital. If the victim needs hospitalization, and they would in a medical legal case such as this, the police must preserve the clothing, must record the injuries, and all of this can be done at the hospital. And importantly, as Mr. Ribeiro will tell you, a statement under 164 of the Code of Criminal Procedure of the survivor must be recorded in the presence of a local magistrate. And if this is to be done at the hospital, then the police must enable the magistrate to come to the hospital and record the survivor's statement. The 164 statement is the heart of every criminal case. Finally, if the survivor of the rape should pass away, then the body must be handed over to her family after postmortem analysis, right? So this is broadly, very briefly, the basic law of the country. This is the law that exists in every part of this country. This is the law that this country says is our common societal value, right? Now, what happens in Hathras? So first, post the assault, after she's found in the field, her mother and her brother take her to the Champa police station, where the police immediately delay in registering an FIR. Initially, they try to turn away the family, and the brother puts his sister on a stone slab outside the police station and says, "Please register her FIR, our FIR." Finally, when people see that this young woman is so grievously hurt, is bleeding, is lying outside the police station, an ambulance is called. She's taken to a local hospital first. They're not able to deal with the scale of her injuries, and then she is taken to a more specialized hospital. There, at this more specialized hospital, on September 21st and 22nd, Young India clearly names her upper caste neighbors and their friends. So 4 men, Lavkush, Ravi, Ramu, and Sandeep, as her assaulters. Eventually, the extent of her injuries is so grievous that that super specialty hospital in UP asked that she be transferred to the Safdarjung Medical Hospital in Delhi, where she dies a day after she is admitted. We do not know till now if the police has fulfilled their duty by ensuring that while she was in UP, a magistrate came to the hospital to record her statement. She was at the hospital for over 12 days. We also don't know if the police till this point have preserved any evidence, whether it's clothing, whether it's samples, or whether they have even recorded in detail the extent of her injuries that a medical legal case such as this demands. But what followed subsequently after her death at Safdarjung is even more chilling, because that tells you much more about the state of UP, the police in UP, and those they answer to. And in the chain of command, the police of any state answers to the Home Minister of that state. The Home Minister of UP by portfolio is the Chief Minister of UP, Mr. Adityanath. So after her death in Delhi, this is important. India's body is whisked away in a black jeep with UP license plates. And despite fierce protestations of her family, is cremated by the police between 2:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. in the early morning of the next day. How do we know this? The journalist Tanushree Pandey of India Today, in her first person account, and she has uploaded video footage onto the net, says this. She captures the police on video and audio telling India's family that there have been mistakes made, galtiyan hui hai, but it is time to move on. And so they lock her family members in their home and then proceed to cremate India. The family, in normal course of things, because they practice Hinduism, wanted the body of their child brought back home, cleaned, and then cremated during the day as is customary. The police, while cremating the body, also prevent the press from taking pictures or recording their actions. Tanushree Pandey captures all of this. Meanwhile, on October 1st at 4:30 p.m., the Additional Director General of Police, Mr. Prashant Kumar, apparently relying on the Forensic Science Lab report, says India's cause of death was injury to the spinal cord. No sperm was found and therefore no rape occurred. Now, there are two things you have to bear in mind. That sperm deteriorates quickly. So if you've recorded samples for the FSL, as was done in this case 8 days after the event, then nothing will remain. The officer would also do well to note that Section 166A of the Penal Code makes it a punishable offense for the police not to register a rape. This is an amendment to the Penal Code that was brought in after the Nirbhaya gang rape. That the body was cremated by the police in a hurry makes it easier for Mr. Kumar to spin the story. Reports indicate that FSL samples were taken 8 days after the event, making it impossible for bodily fluids like sperm to be found. However, the amendments to our rape law mandate only that penetration is required to establish rape or gang rape, not presence of sperm. Further, the nature of the injuries, repeated statements by the victim make the gang rape clear. The Allahabad High Court on the same day, October 1st, 2020, shaken by the course of events, has taken suo motu cognizance of the events. In its detailed order termed In Re Right to Decent and Dignified Last Rites and Cremations, the judges point to case law that mandates that the right to dignity and fair treatment is available to all in life and death. A decade ago, the same High Court had declared that the right to life and dignity includes the right of a deceased to having her body treated with respect, subject to her tradition, her culture, and the religion that she practiced. The next date of hearing before the High Court is unfortunately October 12th, meaning that India's family must withstand the pressure, the extraordinary pressure that is being mounted on them to change their version of events. What is their version of events? That 4 upper caste Thakur men gang raped their daughter, leading to her death. How do we know that pressure is being put on them to change their version of events? We know this because there is much footage that is being shared of district magistrates visiting the family, saying that eventually the press will be gone, but we will be here. So why don't you learn to move on? Now, the historical reality of our country, and this is really the place that the Constitution occupies and the space that the Constitution occupies. The historical reality of our country is that events like the gang rape of India have been routine. In pre-constitutional feudal India, the labor, the bodies, and the aspirations of lower castes, especially Dalits, were the socially sanctioned privy of upper caste Indians. Our constitution, recognizing this systematic degradation of lower caste persons, mandated prohibition of discrimination on grounds of caste and sex. But it did more. It made reparations. It provided for reservations in educational institutions, political constituencies, and public employment for members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now, this constitutional vision is a particularly radical and revolutionary one, because in many societies, there are sections of those societies that have been historically degraded, whose labor have in fact resulted in the accumulation of enormous wealth for those who are better placed than them. For instance, in the United States of America, despite the presence of slavery, the American constitutions makes no efforts at either recognizing this historical reality or making reparations of any sort. India's constitution, by its equality code of Article 14, Article 15, the right to life and liberty, Article 21, and numerous textual provisions in the constitution, has picked a different way. And that different way is one, we recognize the evils that have been done to lower caste Indians, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes in constitutional language. Two, we apologize for it. How do we apologize? By making reparations. We apologize by making reparations in the form of reservations, so that there is an effort that at least current generations and future generations deserve a different life, deserve opportunity, and deserve better. But India's case and the Hatras gang rape shows us that no constitution has any meaning if those tasked with enforcing it, like the state administration and like the police, have aligned themselves to an unconstitutional caste-based code of loyalty. Cynthia Stephen, a Dalit activist and writer appearing on Faye D'Souza, a Bombay-based senior journalist, show yesterday, says this: why on earth was her body torn from the family and burnt in the dark somewhere like it's a piece of trash? In Bangalore, our garbage trucks take the solid waste outside the city and incinerate it in an open field. This is something like that. No dignity, even in death. Now, India's violation is part of a larger story of our country. It's not just India's spine that is broken. And if you read the FSL report and you read accounts from her family, you will see, and doctors who treated her, that her spine was broken at multiple spaces. So it is not just that her spine is broken. It is today that the spine of the Indian state and the police that is fractured and broken at multiple spaces. One of the other things that the FSL report indicates is that her tongue was cut because she'd obviously either bitten it, or the way she was strangled, her tongue is cut. But it's clear that it's only emblematic. It's not just that this young 19-year-old Dalit woman's tongue is cut. It is that all our tongues are cut. None of us speak up in this country today. None of us are outraged. Lawyers are not outraged. The court is not outraged. Civil society is not outraged. It is that all our tongues are cut. It is not just that this young woman was brutalized. It is that so many young women in this country are brutalized on a daily basis. In Uttar Pradesh, the reports from the Crime Bureau indicate that there is a significant chance of being gang raped if you are a lower caste. And it is the disregard of this young woman's body, even in death, to my mind, which makes it clear that this country's collective dignity, decency, and conscience is erased forever. Shame on all of us. I can tell you this, that 22 years of practicing law, that the law, the constitution, the penal code, the code of criminal procedure, each of our skill sets is only relevant when the Indian state, our political class, and the police decide to actually serve the constitution. In Uttar Pradesh today, if Hatras is anything to go by, it is clear that the UP government, the UP administration is completely antithetical and intent on assaulting the constitution's vision of India. So what I'll do right now is I'll stop here. I'll open this up for questions because I think questions are a good way of having a conversation. So I think maybe we'll have 20, 25 minutes of questions, and then we'll see how we're doing at that point.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to call upon Mr. Dharmil Doshi to take up the queries. Over to you, Dharmil, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Tharmil Doshi, and I'm a law student at SVKM's Praveen Gandhi College of Law. As also I serve as the campus ambassador for Public Concern for Governance Trust. And it is an utmost privilege for me to be talking to you right now. Ma'am, if you don't mind, I will be addressing a few questions towards you, which we have been asked by the participants over our various platforms.
Let's take 2-3 questions, I mean, at the same time. Maybe you can throw 2-3 questions out and tell me who's asking them, and then I can answer them in groups.
Yes, ma'am. So we have the first question out here. Does a statement under Section 164 differ from a dying declaration? Okay. Secondly, we have...
Capture them and tell me who's asking them, because it's always nice to know who's asking questions.
Yes, ma'am. This question is actually from my end.
Okay. So you put the question first. Well done. That's a good way to proceed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Hope you don't mind that. Secondly, we have a question from Dipanjali. What is the remedy in the event the police or the designated law enforcement agency refuses to admit a FIR, stating that the place of the incident falls outside the jurisdiction of the respective police station? Yes. And thirdly, we have another question from Arushi. Does alteration of information in a Panchnama constitute to alteration of evidence?
Okay. So I'm going to answer all these together because I think they're all in the lines of the IPC. So I will come to them in one caption. Shall we just take the next set of questions and then I can go at all of them together?
Sure, ma'am. So we still have questions coming in the chat box. If you wish, we will proceed with the next few questions.
Please.
So we have a question from Neil. Forensic and autopsy reports indicate that there was no rape, but at this time, do you think the statements of the forensic labs should be held credible?
Okay. And we'll take one more.
Further, we have a question from Ishan. A bit of context before the question. He says, rights were meant to be protected and liberate us all. However, the caste system's existence in the contemporary has made these rights a commodity for the upper class. How do we get rid of this commodization of rights and move towards achieving equality, which appears to be utopic in the present, and strive for an egalitarian society?
Clearly on lines to becoming a thinker and an academic with that question. So let me just start with this set and then we'll come back to the next set, if that's okay. I want to start with actually the forensic autopsy report because I wanted to talk about it. I actually have a copy of it, right, which is really interesting. A journalist friend sent it to me. And I don't know how many of folks in the audience, how many students, how many of you have actually done criminal law. But one of the weaknesses of how criminal law is taught is that we are rarely, Mr. Ribeiro, presented with, tools like, well, this is a forensic report. This is what it looks like. This is what an FSL report looks like. This is what a postmortem report looks like. So, these real ways in which you establish crime are rarely discussed in a criminal law class. And I wish they were. But, I have in front of me, the FSL report. It's very interesting, right? And I'm just trying to find, I don't want to, share this with you, but I'm just going to read, two or three key parts, right? So vertebra and spine, fracture of vertebra, there's multiple fractures. What the FSL report seems to indicate, right, is that there were tears. There were old tears that have healed. Now, samples for the FSL are taken 8 days after, right? So it doesn't mean that rape hasn't happened, because after the amendment, rape law in India, to whoever's asked this question, does not require there to be presence of bodily fluids, because bodily fluids like sperm evaporate or disintegrate, I should say, disintegrate very rapidly. They could disintegrate within a few hours of the crime. So nothing is going to remain 8 days hence. Tears will heal because you've been in the hospital for 8 days. That is why these samples are expected to be taken as quickly as possible. So when the police delay in taking samples, they're doing something quite intentionally and in a concerted manner. They know, and anyone who practices criminal law knows, that evidence deteriorates with time. So that is why the sooner you take the evidence, you collect it and safeguard it, the more chances you have of in fact demonstrating the crime. Likewise, it's not just the samples that are taken, right? Likewise, when you quickly get rid of the body, you are ensuring again that in fact evidence is being destroyed, right? So everything that the police does here, and it is not like, I must correct you for the person, the law student who's asked me about the forensic autopsy report. It's not the autopsy report, it's just the FSL report, right? The FSL report does not say that there is no rape. It only documents the injuries and evidence that of what has happened to that body. Whether there is rape or not is something to be demonstrated. No report will ever say that this has happened. The job of a postmortem doctor or a lab technician or a person assessing samples is not to conclusively say that this section of the Indian Penal Code has been violated. It is, in fact, to tell us exactly what has happened to a body. So if you look at a postmortem report of, say, an extrajudicial killing, it will say that there is, bullets have entered the body from at 16 points. It would appear that this person was shot from multiple directions. The postmortem report will never say this is murder. The postmortem report will only tell you where each bullet has penetrated the body. That is the job of FSLs and postmortem reports, right? So the report, in fact, it is wrong to say that it doesn't say there's no rape. The report just says this, that it documents where the spine is broken, what is the state of the body, where are the tears in the hymen. It documents all of that. At 8 days, you cannot recover bodily fluid from anyone. It is not possible, right? So there I must correct you. Now, since the Nirbhaya case, right, rape law in India was amended, right? And there was the Verma Commission report. And after the amendment of the penal code, it is incumbent on the police, right, to lodge a complaint of rape. And if you don't lodge the complaint of rape when it's reported, then in fact the police officers can be proceeded against. But even despite that, let us leave this provision 161A aside. A 5-judge constitution bench of the Supreme Court, taking into cognizance the fact that the police are notoriously lax when it comes to registering FIR, especially of people who are powerless, makes it incumbent on them. 5 judges of the Supreme Court makes it, in Islakumari is the name of the case, and you should read it. It's a very, very important case in India, makes it incumbent on them to register an FIR when a person comes to a police station immediately. They have to. There is no element of discretion that is enabled. You can register the FIR, then investigate, then decide if there should be a charge sheet. That is where discretion comes into play. But at this point of registering the FIR, there is absolutely none whatsoever. There is no discretion that the police has. It is a mandatory obligation of police duty. So let's be very, very clear. And the case on that is Lalita Kumar. The next question, I think, is, see, 164 is a key composition, right, of any criminal case. In any criminal case, whether it's rape, whether it's murder, whether it's theft, whether it's whether it's drugs. These are the cases that Bombay is imagination of the country is now focused on. So the 164 statement is very key because it is when this person walks into a police station, if she's in shape to do so, or it's when the police call this person in and record his or her statement, their version of events as it pertains to them, or their version of events differing with some other account. But this is a very key component of how you build a case. So if the police do not record that statement in the presence of a magistrate, because this young woman was in the hospital for so many days, presumably they should have taken the magistrate to her bedside and recorded that 164 statement. If that wasn't done, then that is a dereliction of duty. And the difference is that if a person is in fact in such a bad situation that it is clear that this person is going to die, then also there too, that dying declaration must be recorded ideally in the presence of a magistrate. And it is the job of the police to facilitate this. So you can see how the police, in fact, far from doing their job, has become, in this case, and maybe it is emblematic of more, that is the case in UP, but is in fact acts as an obstacle at every point in ensuring that the evidence is secured, that statements are recorded, that the crime has a chance of being proved, and that a young woman's body is eventually allowed to go home. It's at every single point the police is acting in a contrary fashion. Now, Mr. Ribeiro will speak better to this, but it is my understanding, and many retired police officers have gone on the record to say that, look, this is not just, local police, the local SHO or the local SP suddenly saying, I'm going to do it this way. They can only act in that fashion if there is a chain of command that is being brought down on them. No local cop will otherwise decide to forcibly cremate a body. So the question that then remains is, what has the police force become in the state of Uttar Pradesh? And, I am talking about Hatras in specific, therefore I say UP. But I am sure this is a reality in many, many, many parts of this country. So I don't want to get caught in this conversation of, which political party rules which state. Right? That's not the idea. The idea here is to say that it is shocking to one's conscience as a citizen, and it is shocking to me as a practitioner of law, including criminal law, to see the penal code, the code of criminal procedure, and the Constitution of India being violated by the police force and the administration in Uttar Pradesh in this fashion. So I think that captures most of the questions. If there are specific questions on the code, perhaps you can send that to me in writing, and I'm happy to answer those separately. Do you have a second set of questions?
Yes, ma'am. We do have a second set of questions. So without further ado, the first question of this set is by Parishi. Would the case be altered if the family of the victim changes the statement at any point of time in future, considering that the Allahabad High Court has taken suo motu cognizance of the matter?
Yeah. Good. Let's take a couple of questions and then I'll answer them together.
Next up, we have a question from Nawaz. Ma'am, how would you describe the importance of the time on the failure of practical procedures with respect to the right to be treated with dignity?
Practical procedures.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
and along this line...
One second, let's hold on to that, right to dignity. Let me answer these two because I have not answered one question, which was the last question on rights, I think, which a law student or lawyer had posed on as to, what has happened to rights. I think if I'm not mistaken, that's the last question you read out.
Yes, ma'am, the commodization of rights and them being abused by...
So let's just take these few questions together and then I'll do the next lot.
Yes,
So I think, on the commodification of rights, it's clear, right, that those who have more resources will always enforce their rights better because the courts are amenable, they're conducive to folks with resources. I mean, this is a given. And I think the point you're making in your question is well taken. I do think that in many ways, litigation and the rights regime has become a space for those with better resources, middle class India, upper middle class India, upper class India, no question, right? Because enforcing your rights is a resource heavy occupation. And that is where Indian politics was supposed to have done better. That is where Indian politics was supposed to have become the voice of people who don't fall in those classes. They were supposed to, our political class was expected to speak for the most disenfranchised in India, to pass legislation, to be their voice in the legislature, to raise those issues, and to do better. And Hatras proves to us that one, it is so difficult to even prove that your daughter has been gang raped and murdered if you do not come from a well resourced upper caste family. That is clear. So I think there is no disagreement with your point. Unfortunately, this is the reality of rights enforcement. That's the first thing. And historically, we had hoped that we would do better. That was the point of public interest litigation. That was the point of a progressive constitution. That was the point of making reparations, of reservations, all of that, right? And that was what makes me idealistic about this constitution. And that is why it is so hard to see it being brutalized in this way in India today. And that is why I thought we should have this conversation. I don't know what is meant by practical procedures, right, when it comes to treatment of bodies, if I've understood your question correctly. It's quite simple. We all have loss in each of our families. I have had grandparents who passed away. We have all experienced loss. We know what happens to the bodies of our families. If it's a medical case and they pass away at the hospital, the tests are done, and then the body is brought home, and then the body is cremated per our rituals, whatever those rituals may be. And for those communities who don't practice cremation, then the body is taken care of per their rituals. This idea that the practical realities, the problem with me is I have a problem with this word practical, right? The law is very clear in this country that families have a right to their members' bodies. It is very simple. And we cannot countenance this kind of hurried disposal of a body. So it is not that the practical procedures of the right to dignity are not being respected. It is that this is contemporary politics in India, that caste matters and that caste pays and that caste will protect caste. This is the practicality of India. Now, I think as law students, you all have to decide which India you subscribe to. Do you subscribe to the Constitution's India? Or do you subscribe to this other India, where the practice of caste is what is practical? I'm very clear which side I fall on that. I subscribe to the Constitution's India. And I believe that there is still space for the Constitution, the penal code, and the legal community to make some difference. Some difference, not all. We can't make all of it. All of it comes when the law, the courts, the police, and our political class work towards constitutional values. That is clearly not the case today, right? So I don't think that we have trouble when it comes to the practical procedures of maintaining the dignity of upper caste India. We seem to have these troubles when it comes to maintaining the dignity of lower caste India. On the Allahabad High Court's decision, actually, it's a very interesting order, and I got the order in the morning today. So for those of you who don't know, I'll read out portions. And if you haven't read it, it's very interesting. You must read it. It's now publicly available. It's a decision, it's an order given yesterday, court number 16, Justice Rajan Roy and Jasprit Singh. right? And they take suo motu cognizance of what has happened in Hatras. And they say this: as per newspaper items and electronic media reports, the dead body of the victim was taken to her village, but surprisingly and painfully, and I'm just reading, painfully enough, it was not handed over to family members so that the last rites of the deceased victim could not be performed as per prevalent customs and religious inclinations in a decent and dignified manner. Based on the aforesaid news items and reports, we have also come to know that not only was the body not handed over to family members, i.e., her father, mother, brother, sister, it was cremated with the help of some other persons. The cremation took place at about 2:30 a.m. And from aforesaid reports and news items, what comes out is that the family of the deceased victim followed Hindu traditions, according to which last rites are not performed after sunset and before daybreak. Newspaper reports and clippings show that the family members kept demanding for the body and also informed the authorities that, as per traditions followed by them, cremation cannot take place after sunset and before daybreak. Yet the district authorities got the cremation performed contrary to traditions which the family followed. In this regard, and they take cognizance of it. The court also says that the moment the body of the deceased victim left Delhi Safdarjung Hospital at 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, it was rushed to a hurried cremation in Hatras village, 200 kilometers away. It was marked, this cremation, per the High Court, is marked by a disregard to protocol and high-handedness by a police force that did not let her family perform her last rites. According to the same reports, the High Court says the 19-year-old Dalit woman died at 6:55 a.m. on Tuesday at Safdarjung Hospital. The family told the Indian Express, and the judges are quoting, that they were not informed, and instead of accompanying the body in the vehicle, instead of them was an Uttar Pradesh police constable apart from the driver. The father of the victim said, we had been, quote, we had been waiting all day to take her home, do the rituals, the last rites. The police did not let us do that deliberately. The report further goes on to say that even as the body was on its way, district authorities and police started preparations at the woman's village for a late night funeral. Logs of wood were arranged, lights of the cremation ground switched on, and the road to the victim's family home heavily barricaded. The reports also mentioned that the statement of the SP of police that the body was handed over to the family and the administration only provided logistical support to transport the body were contrary to the father having said that the cremation could not be done. Um, then the High Court says when the ambulance stops 100 meters from the woman's home, that is when the first flare up takes place between local residents and officials. Reports mention an official acknowledging anonymously that there were instructions to wrap up the cremation at night to prevent a law and order situation in the morning. The deceased brother says the ambulance headed straight to the cremation spot. His mother fell on the feet of the officers. The women of the family cried. They folded their hands, saying, please let her come home one last time. At some point, police personnel got aggressive, pushed, kicked some relatives who were trying to intervene. We were afraid we would be lathi charged. The High Court order mentions the presence of District Magistrate Praveen Kumar Laksar, SP Hatras Vikrant Veer, as also additional SP Prakash Kumar, Sadabad Circle Officer Brahm Singh, and other officers. And I think it's also interesting to note all of this because it gives you a sense, if you are in a bustling town like Hatras is, you do have extensive police that is available. So you have extensive police that is available to solve crime, to prevent crime, to protect people, but you also have extensive police available to, in fact, cover up crime, to set people apart, and as in this case, to forcibly cremate a body. The rest of the High Court order is also very interesting. They look at cases that speak to how a body must be treated. And then the High Court says that we will go into, the next date is the 12th of October, and that we will go into these issues of whether a heinous crime was committed, and will an SIT that has been constituted by the state government, will it be adequate? And finally, the judges actually quote Oscar Wilde. So for all of you who are fans of literature, The judge writing the judgment quotes Wilde as saying, quote, "Death must be so beautiful to lie in the soft brown earth with the grasses wearing above one's head and listen to silence, to have no yesterday and no tomorrow, to forget time, to forget life, and to be at peace." um, I thought that the High Court order was very good. It was very detailed. I think my only area of concern is that it is a long enough date, 12th of this month. And that means that the district administration and the state administration have now 11 full days to put pressure on the girl's family to recant their story. That's, I think, the point. That is the only sort of area of discontent that I have with the High Court order. Should we take a couple more questions?
Sure, ma'am. In the event that we can accommodate a few more questions at your discretion, we will proceed with a couple more questions. So the first question is by Nargolkar Srividya. There are a few procedural mandates under the CRPC and the IPC which protect the rights of the accused or even the hostile witnesses. In the light of the same, are virtual courts feasible post-pandemic in order to deal with such nuances?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. Yeah.
The next question is by Vignesh, as also the similar line of thought has come across my mind. In the event that a public servant instructs any other person or a police instructs any other person, can that said person be held liable under Article 15 of the Constitution of India?
Interesting. Good question. Yeah. And we'll take one more and then we can wrap it up. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And the final question we have is from Bewab. Ma'am, in the case of the Unnao rape, which happened previously, the court said that there was nothing wrong with the law, but its ineffective implementation on ground.
Yeah.
If the courts know such a diverse difference in theory and in practice, why can't stricter ground level measures be implemented in the status quo?
Yeah, sure. All right. So let's take these three questions. Thank you for those three questions. I think it's a very good question on virtual courts. So I do a lot of criminal defense work, right? So lest you get the wrong idea, I do believe in the rights of the accused. And I represent some of the folks right now, in Bombay as well, in the Bollywood scheme of things. So I do believe in the rights of the accused. So it's there. It is clear. I think that this is a big problem because I think virtual courts, the functioning of virtual courts, let me put it this way, has been uneven across the country, and this was the original topic of this lecture. So, for instance, you've had better functioning of virtual courts in Delhi. And even in places like Bombay, you've had very scattered functioning of virtual courts. And by this, I mean at the level of district courts. So broadly, high courts are functioning well. The Delhi High Court is active. Bombay High Court is also active. I practice mostly at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been extremely active during these times of COVID. I wouldn't say that we're back at our usual caseload, but nonetheless, there are multiple courtrooms functional. But again, this is at the level of the appellate court. So today, if you are an accused and you are under trial or you are, facing trial, then it is much more difficult for you. And if those jails haven't been emptied post the Supreme Court's ruling on trying to release prisoners given COVID, then your case is not going to be heard in an expeditious fashion simply because many district courts are not functional. And this is a huge blow when it comes to the rights of the accused. So many states, I know in Delhi, there has been a priority that has been set up where bails are heard. Certain categories of cases are being heard on a priority basis. And we hope that those will safeguard rights of the accused. But having said that, I mean, the court system pre-COVID was overloaded, and the court system during COVID with virtual courts is inadequate. There's no question. And the district courts are the courts that are hurt the most. So this is something to bear in mind. So your your case is your question is taken. Also, I think the other part of the problem is, and this is something that I think about and I'd like to flesh out more thoroughly, which is that there is something about a physical courtroom where you have the judge, you have the accused, you have the lawyers presence in the same space, and you have a physical, you have this kind of mediated, conversation, that just doesn't exist in a virtual courtroom using a computer. So that idea of fair trial, public courtroom where the public is welcome, and the decision, the adjudicator, opposing counsel, and the accused and the victim are all in the same courtroom, is actually quite cardinal. That setting, that placement, that all of that is quite cardinal to our version of justice, right? And our sense of how to adjudicate. And there is an impersonality that is bought in with virtual courts. So I think that especially in criminal cases, in criminal trial, this is going to become a problem. One, we don't have the capacity in our district courts to have extensive virtual courts, which you need to process cases out of this country. But two, you have this other problem where I do feel qualitatively the experience of the courtroom is very, very different. And I think this is going to be a problem going forward, especially because we don't know when courts will reopen. And courts will not reopen as long as it's not safe, because the average courtroom in India, whether it's the Supreme Court or whether it's a district court, is just packed. These are packed rooms full of people. And if you don't have a vaccine, this is a huge problem, right? So rightly so, the courts are also reticent because they're worried about the public health consequences of this. I think very interesting question on Article 15. Thank you for that. And I think for those of you who are not familiar with Article 15, you must be, you should be. This is what the article says. It's basically the Constitution's prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And it says this: the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. And then it goes below. 15.4 is very interesting. It says nothing shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward class of citizens, or for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Now, what is interesting also, and I would imagine this is where the question is coming from, is that this provision textually on the face of it seems to be protection against the state. There is writing and there is case law as to how this should also be horizontally applicable. So inter se, between you and me. So if Mr. Ribeiro and me were contesting something, then Article 15 should also be effective inter se between us. So say I was discriminating against Mr. Ribeiro on grounds of race or caste or sex, then the Article 15 horizontal application of non-discrimination should also extend to us as private citizens. The question here is, should that also extend to a public servant? Well, I think it's this. I think it's also a little bit about creative lawyering, right? If you are a public servant, you are a representative of the state. So just as Article 15 protects me from the state, which you are a part of, I do think that should extend to individual liability of the public servant in question also. I think in this case, it should extend to the individual liability of at least the higher ranking police officers who have in fact acted as an obstacle to the establishment of a crime, as in the case of Hatras. You're right. I think the last question was on the Unnao rape and ineffective implementation on the ground. Courts can do very little about ineffective implementation of on the ground. It's not the court's job. The courts can at best monitor investigation, and that too is a burden. They can write tight judgments. They can hear the evidence fairly and clearly, and they can write a well-reasoned judgment. But if you have policing of this sort, as we saw in Unnao, again, a rape by a state legislator, and in this case in Hatras, and you see the pattern that is forming, which is not ineffective implementation. That's the point, right? The pattern between Unnao, Hatras, and many, many other gang rapes is that it is not about ineffective implementation. It is about active co-option of the police in not addressing a crime. That is very different from ineffective implementation of the penal code or the constitution. This is different. This is not ineffective implementation. This is effective obstacle course being set up by the police and the administration. So I think that that's a very, very different and a much more frightening scenario than ineffective implementation. All right, so I will probably stop at this point.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That threw significant light with respect to my query with regards to Article 15. Ma'am, we as law students look up to you, and we can't thank you enough for broadening our horizons with respect to not only the perception of law and the judicial proceedings, but also with respect to policy and governance at large, and how law is to be viewed and actually its sanctity is to be reserved in India at this very moment. I would now like to hand over to Bhavya to continue with the rest of the session.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Dharmir sir. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Kavita Sharma from Praveen Gandhi College of Law to speak a few words. Over to you, ma'am.
Respected Mr. Ribeiro, dignitaries from PCGT, Madam Menaka Guruswamy, faculty members from Vaze College, students and participants. Today we have heard from Madam Guruswamy what happened in Hatras. Ma'am, you aptly addressed the various incidences before and after. And I think it is an echo of our own inner voice. Our inner self is asking this question, that what is happening in my country and what as a citizen of this country I can do to correct things which can happen to any one of us, and where to go, where the whole machinery is set out to do more wrongs and not correct the wrongs. As a teacher of law, many times I become speechless when my students ask me, ma'am, the encounter in Hyderabad was the right thing. And I know it is not right. It is unconstitutional. It is unlawful. I become speechless when I can't address this kind of questions. I am disturbed by the situations, many situations which we can't help, but just to shed few tears. While I was listening to you, ma'am, somewhere, I could feel that my eyes have become moist. And last 3 days, I'm discussing at home, trying to sensitize my young 11-year-old twin boys that how they should respect women. Same thing I do when I am addressing my students of, my constitutional law students, other students. That is what I think I can do. Right now, I think I am disturbed, and so are all my other fellow countrymen. I think this whole disturbance should become a wave, and it should become a storm, and it should disturb the system, and they should shake up, they should rise, and they should address the problem, and they should not shield the culprits, but they should help the victims. In this case, everyone is asking the same question: what was the hurry of the cremation, when as per the Hindu rights, it cannot be done from sunset to sunrise. It cannot be done in the dark of the night. When the family members are just asking for the body of their own child, why we cannot oblige? And who are we obliging? Are we obliging people who are having power in their hand and who can mess up with the whole thing? I think, again, questions remain unanswered. Ma'am, in the beginning of your lecture, I salute you, ma'am, for your courage. You call the victim India. Ma'am, that shows how much of guts is required to speak like that. I was amazed when you say I will call the victim as India. And correctly so, ma'am. India is asking for help, and as a citizen, it is our duty. Each one of us is under moral, ethical, and constitutional obligation to rise to the occasion and ask questions which are disturbing us. Ma'am, I am not just giving a speech. These are my emotions, Generally, speech is given when you have to give a speech, you have to write down. But these are emotions not only coming from me as a mother or as a sister, but I'm a citizen. I'm disturbed by the whole thing that is happening in my country. Be it the changes we incorporated after the Nirbhaya incident. And again, the questions remain: are the laws sufficient, or the machinery which has to implement the law, are they not functioning as per the requirements of their profession? Menaka ma'am, thank you so much for voicing what we all of us are thinking, and we look forward to have continuous guidance from you. And I am really thankful to PCGT, Ribeiro sir, Raja sir, and other members, especially Shivam, uh, and other members of PCGT for continuous support. And I am thankful to Vaze College and the student coordinators for this program. Some programs we end at a happy note. Oh, yes, the program was successful. But some programs leave you disturbed. And I think this is the right thing, what has happened. Things should disturb you. When you get disturbed, you ask questions. And when you ask questions, there is someone who is under constitutional obligation, under moral obligation to give you the correct answers and to correct the things. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think I should stop now. Thank you so much, PCGT, Vazi College, and Menika, ma'am. Thank you so much. I should also thank my students, Bhavya, Tanmay, and Dharmil, who have conducted the whole program so smoothly. And these are the budding citizens. They are lawyers. They are budding lawyers. They are professionals. I think they are going to, bring the right answers, I think. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I now call upon Mr. Manas Patil to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Bhavya. I would like to express my special thanks of gratitude to our speaker of the afternoon, Dr. Menaka Guruswamy, for being here today on Bapu's 151st birth anniversary and giving us such an in-depth information regarding the topic. A special thanks to Dr. B.B. Sharma, the principal of VG Vaze College, and the faculty in charge, Ms. Sangeeta Ahir ma'am, as well as Dr. Nutan Madhiwal, the principal of Pravin Gandhi College of Law, and the faculty in charge, Ms. Kavita Sharma, for giving us this amazing opportunity to organize this webinar today. I express my gratitude to all the PCGT trustees, the students from Pravin Gandhi College of Law, the organizing committee of Waziman 2020, and Mr. Shivam Jain Kakaria sir, who have been working tirelessly to pull off this event. I would like to thank Mr. Julio Ribeiro sir, Mr. VP Raja sir, and all the trustees for being present here today and for their constant support. And lastly, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the students present here today to participate in the Vaze Model UN, which is being organized in collaboration with UN Information Center for India and Bhutan on 31st of October and 1st of November. Please feel free to contact any of the OC members for the same. And now I request all the participants to keep their videos on for a picture. Okay, so is the picture taken?
I
Yes,
didn't
it is.
take a picture on Zoom. I learn new things every day. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Take care and be well.
Uh, just an announcement for all our participants. Participants, the link for the feedback form has been sent on the chat. Kindly see to it. Your feedback is imperative to us, as also it is imperative for your participation certificates. And at this point, I believe as soon as Manas instructs, you can leave the meeting.